Hello and welcome to this fourth lesson in our English reading GCSE prep. If you're sitting any of the GCSEs this year, next year, the year after, and you just want to get a little bit more understanding of how to sort of analyze language, comprehend it, structure, write evaluatively, comparatively, analytically, all that good stuff that you need to do in the exams, there's going to be some great content in here for you. Last week, or the last few weeks, we've been doing language device analysis, word class analysis, and structural analysis. If you haven't watched those videos, they're going to be on the channel and I highly recommend them. Today's lesson, we're going to be going through ideas, perspectives, thoughts, and feelings. So this is where there are several questions in, I think, every exam board that ask you to look at how the writer presents an idea or a thought or a feeling on something. So for example, with AQA, you have to look at how the writer presents ideas about whatever the piece is about. So it could be about sailing or archaeology or cycling or parenthood or whatever, right? So we're going to focus a lot today on how to bring out the thoughts and feelings of characters. One of the biggest ways to understand this is sometimes there are explicit meanings, which means they're right there on the surface where it literally says she thought this, he thought that, they felt this, whatever. So those are quite surface level and pretty easy to find. We will do some of that, but there's also implicit meanings. So the implicit meanings are a little bit more complex. You have to sort of dig a bit deeper and try and work out what the subtext or the symbolism or the connotations are within. Now, we talked about that last week as well a little bit. So a lot of the ways you find thoughts and feelings and ideas and perspectives will be through these same sort of ideas of subtext and symbolism and connotations and things like that. Others, it will be more literally explicitly saying something, or from reading it, you can infer the implied meaning. So this is also called inference. You infer what has been implied. Okay, cool. So that's that. This is just going to mock up my whole thing, so I'm just going to delete that bit. So we're going to read a piece that was a GCSE piece, I think, about 3 years ago now. We're not going to read the whole thing. As usual, we're sort of going to take an extract. And then once we've finished reading the extract and going through how thoughts and feelings are presented, we'll write one paragraph, maybe even two short paragraphs for this, depending on how we do, because there are really two major perspectives we want to focus on in this piece. There's the perspective of Sister Brendan. Sister literally is in, she's a nun in this school, she's a nun, Sister Brendan, and also the writer. So the writer's perspective. And this is written in first person perspective. So it's all from the writer's perspective, ultimately. So Sister Brendan, the head teacher, saw my car pull up outside her office window and was at the door of the school to greet me before I had the chance to straighten my tie and comb my hair. So straight away, we've got an implicit meaning here. Now, there's nothing explicitly said here about how Sister Brendan or the writer would feel, but I think we can work out how they feel, or something that they think, both of them, from this first evidence. Sorry, my brain isn't working well today. So from the perspective of the writer, he may be feeling slightly overwhelmed or ill-prepared, basically, because it talks about how he hasn't even had a chance to straighten his tie. So obviously straightening your tie symbolically is like, you know, getting yourself done up well before a meeting or whatever, and he hasn't even had a chance to do this. So he's not fully prepared yet, and maybe she's a little bit overwhelming. For Sister Brendan, it suggests that she's feeling excited or eager, or possibly nervous, because obviously she's run straight out to greet him. It's also probably a sign of her being quite friendly. So even from that one quote, we can infer a couple of implicit, implied meanings. She beamed so widely that had she worn lipstick, I would have expected to see traces on her ears. So this is sort of hyperbole, right? The hyperbole of this, but the fact that she is that grinning from ear to ear literally seems to me to suggest now that it's more excitement than and eagerness than nervousness. So I'm just going to take that bit out. I don't think there's nerves here. So excited or eager. Now, one of the other things you have to do as an English student is you have to sort of look for the most reasonable explanation. So it was reasonable to think that she might be nervous, and that's why she came straight out, you know, because when you're nervous, you do things like that. But as soon as we see she's smiling from ear to ear, then it removes that possibility. So English is not a black and white subject like maths or science necessarily, but it can still be narrowed down to much darker shades of grey or much lighter shades of grey, depending. Yeah, and there are some black and whites in English. So this shows her happiness, and it's hyperbole that shows the happiness. Feeling of happiness. She beamed so widely that had she worn lipstick. Now, this is a really subtle thing, but this is how far I want you to be able to dive into it as well. So this suggests Sister Brendan is very humble, and the writer notices this humbleness, or this, you know, this modesty, because he's saying that she's not the type of woman to wear lipstick. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with wearing lipstick or anything like that. But I think that lipstick has connotations of sort of, you know, trying to make yourself appear more attractive, beautiful, etc. She doesn't wear lipstick. And especially when you combine that she's a nun, we can get this sense that she's maybe quite a modest person. And it seems that, you know, he's written this, so it seems that his perspective is he feels that she's quite modest or humble by the fact she doesn't wear lipstick. She just is how she is. He then describes the school as a dark, the town as a dark, brooding northern industrial town. So we have this feeling about the town of a negative feeling, basically, about the town. And we see this from the imagery and symbolism of the darkness. But that is then, well, and that he goes even deeper into that. So he talks about the grim and forbidding wasteland of derelict buildings and piles of rubble. So even deeper, like it goes from negative feeling to almost disgust at Crompton. He feels disgusted at Crompton. Grim, forbidding, wasteland. He's calling this place a wasteland, derelict. Yeah. Now, all of those words as well create what's called a semantic field of sort of decay, really. Yeah, grim, forbidding, wasteland, derelict, rubble, piles. That's called a semantic field when lots of words all link to the same sort of general idea. So the semantic field of decay shows the disgust at Crompton. And then this is completely, well, there's more as well. There's this imagery, this simile of the town being even more disgusting. I'm going to skip that because I think you get the idea. But then it's juxtaposed. So from this grime and dust of Crompton, I walked into an oasis, a calm, bright, welcoming, and orderly building. So an oasis, this is a metaphor. An oasis is usually it's like a spring of water in a otherwise pretty deserted desert, dark, or not dark, sorry, sunny, hot place. So obviously when people get to an oasis, it's like this breath of fresh air or this cold glass of water type vibe. So you feel really good if you get to an oasis in a desert. So it shows a kind of a relief in this place. It's a breath of fresh air. It's a very positive connotations of the school. It kind of almost seems like it revives him a little bit. And you've also got the fact that it juxtaposes Crompton. And then finally, you've got this long list as well of positive semantic field of order, because you've got calm, bright, welcoming, orderly. So all of them create a sense of order or stillness, calmness, that sort of thing. Okay, so we've had a couple of different thoughts and feelings already. So we've got a first impression of how she feels about him. She's excited that he's here, how he feels about her. He seems to be quite endeared to her, sees her as a good leader of this school, but at the same time, he feels that she is very eager and keen, right, full of energy, maybe more than he's ready for because he's not quite prepared. He hasn't even strained his tie yet. And then there's also the feelings about the town versus the school. The town is very negative. He feels very badly about the town of Crompton, but the school is an oasis. He feels very positively about the school. Okay, so then we can do a little bit of explicit meanings in the next one. So good afternoon to you, Mr. Finn, said Sister Brendan enthusiastically. So that's explicit. Like, you know, you could literally say she's enthusiastic because it literally says the adverb enthusiastically. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring it up because there's nothing wrong with using explicit meanings to try and help you to build out good answers for how a writer thinks or feels about something. So if you're writing an essay on how Sister Brendan feels about the school and the writer who's come to sort of visit the school, there's nothing wrong with saying enthusiastically. There's nothing necessarily even wrong with using this quote, but what I will say is explicit meanings are weaker than implicit meanings. So if you use explicit meanings, you can still get a good grade, but you're going to do better generally if you use explicit meanings more as a pointer and then try and use implicit meanings. So use this as a support, basically. So if you had read the first paragraph and you're like, huh, she seems quite enthusiastic or quite energetic, use this explicit meaning to kind of give you confidence that you have analysed it correctly. And probably don't use this quote if you have better ones, like she was grinning, she would, you know, there would be traces of the lipstick on her ears, suggesting she was grinning from ear to ear, right? So try to use implicit meanings in your essays, but use explicit meanings to kind of support your ideas and give you confidence that you're on the right track. We're all ready and waiting and raring to go. So this one is somewhat explicit. The fact she's literally saying we're raring to go again shows her enthusiasm, right? Sister Brendan looked like a small hungry blackbird out for the early worm. Now this is the quote out of those three that I would be more inclined to use. This is a bit more implied because it's saying a simile. The simile that Sister Brendan is a hungry blackbird out for the worm. It's a simile. It's also a bit of a cliche, right? The early bird catches the worm. It's like that whole phrase. But this one doesn't directly say that she's enthusiastic, but we get the sense of that because she's being compared to a blackbird out early to get the early worm. So she seems to go a bit more the extra mile than other people, that sort of thing. So the simile slash cliche of the hungry bird or the early bird getting the worm implies her enthusiasm. But the other thing I think that you could say with this one, since it is, you know, the early bird catches the worm is also a cliche of success. If you wake up early, if you get to work earlier than other people, you'll be more successful than them. It implies her enthusiasm and her success. The idea that this school is her having caught the early worm, her actually having created an oasis, a school that is far better than everything else around in Crompton. Good afternoon, sister, I replied, shaking a small, cold hand. This is interesting. I didn't notice this on my first reading, prepping for this necessarily. Well, it wasn't my first reading. I've read this quite a few times, but on that reading, but a small, cold hand. When you compare that also to the fact she doesn't wear lipstick and she has darting, tiny, dark, darting eyes and a sharp little beak of a nose. The other thing that you can infer from the writer's perspective is that he finds the sister quite, Sister Brendan, quite striking character, perhaps physically, or a striking character, like, you know, his admiration for her comes much more, I think, from what she does, because the descriptions of her physically are potentially a little bit, I don't want to say mean exactly, but a little bit neutral or even slightly negative. She's got these teeny little beady eyes, he says, yeah, darting around, and this small cold hand, and she doesn't wear lipstick. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of that, like I said, but we do start to get an impression that he has of her, that she's, at minimum, she's a very simple, humble, modest lady, like I said. And I think that links to nuns quite often, so that makes some sense. But it's the warmth of the school that he's drawn to more than the woman who's built the school, it seems, even though he clearly sees that she's done an amazing job. Did you have a pleasant journey, Mr. Finn? She asked. Her little black glittering eyes looking up into mine. Now this maybe juxtaposes that, because if her eyes are glittering, then this is connotations of warmth and this suggests her kindness. So clearly he is endeared to her in that sense and thinks that she's a remarkable person. The fact that she asks him about his journey, this is obviously showing courtesy. So we can see that he finds her polite, and she is sort of polite and kind. And then, yes, indeed, sister, a very pleasant journey. Couple more, then we get into the model paragraph. So the head teacher took me on a tour of the school, fluttering along the corridors, pointing and chattering and chuckling away as we went from room to room. So you've got all these verb choices of the sister, right? So she's pointing and chattering and chuckling as they go from room to room. So it's quite high energy. It's quite a high energy image with high energy verbs. So again, this suggests her positive attitude and the fact that he enjoys the visit and is engaged. So we've got several thoughts from him and several feelings and thoughts from her, I think. Children's paintings and poems, posters, pictures, book jackets covered every available space. Shelves held attractive books. Tables were covered in shells, models, photographs, and little artifacts. So this one, we can also infer something. So I think that the incredibly long list shows how impressed he is with what he sees. It's almost again back to the fact he felt a bit overwhelmed. He's still just getting out of his car, straightening his tie. This very long list implies he is impressed and very impressed and almost overwhelmed by what he sees, by all of the good work that he sees in this school. It's almost too much to take in. There's so much: paintings, poems, posters, pictures, book jackets. Every available space is filled. Attractive books, shells, models, photographs, artifacts. Yeah, there's a lot here. And then finally, he comments on the kids. So each child we passed said hello brightly, and in all the classrooms, little busybodies were reading, writing, discussing, solving problems, and working at the computers. So this is a very positive view of the children. He has clearly a very positive view of the children. You've got the adverb brightly, so the fact that they all speak brightly. This is very pleasant. It seems like they mean it, and that would endear him to them more. And then we've got another long list, this time not of things that they have already made in the past, but of things they are doing right now. So a long list of active verbs. So reading, writing, discussing, solving, working. Yeah. So all of these verbs together, again, really create a semantic field of activity and work. And you could say of diligence, really. So like these children are working hard, they're diligent, they're doing good things. So, that's a heck of a lot of notes for you on this, but hopefully what you can see from having gone through that with me is that every line, if you're being asked to look at thoughts and feelings and ideas and perspectives, can clearly be used to create ideas and paragraphs that you could write for your answers to these questions on how ideas or thoughts and feelings are shown. Okay, so let's do a paragraph together. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a paragraph on how does the writer convey thoughts and feelings about the school. Okay. Now, if I was writing this as an actual exam, I would split these two things up, but I think I'll write about both just to give you a bit more of a sense. So 2 ideas about the school that you could talk about. You could talk about how it is a relief from its dingy surroundings in Crompton. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about it is a place where children feel safe and accomplish a lot. So I would actually write these as 2 separate paragraphs, but just to try and give you a bit more value in the time we have left, I'll try and cover both and show you how I would write about it. And hopefully this almost writes itself because you've gone through this with me. So hopefully you can see what you would need to do. So one of the ways, or I'm going to say one of the thoughts or feelings, let's do feelings actually, that the writer has about the school is that it is a relief from its dingy surroundings in Crompton. We see this through the juxtaposition of two semantic fields. So we've sort of done our technique before our evidence here, but that's because it's quite a complicated technique. So when speaking of Crompton, the writer uses words such as wasteland and demolished, which imply decay. He feels it is unpleasant and decaying. However, when speaking about the school, he refers to it with words like calm, bright, and welcoming, which all have very positive connotations. From this, we can see that the writer feels that the school is a breath of fresh air in an otherwise unpleasant place. Okay, so that's the first bit. Furthermore, the writer clearly sees that from this safe environment, or it's from this great school, it is a place where children feel safe and accomplish a lot. This is achieved through two long lists. The first list goes through all of the great work that the children have done. Let me just move this down. There we go. So it's nice and easy. Work that the children have done. So we've got posters, paintings, etc., which not only show the diligence just means hard work, by the way, the diligence of the students, also they brighten up the school, give it a sense of life. Later, he comments on how they are all reading, writing, and solving. And this list of active verbs gives us a positive, tells us that the writer has a positive view of the hard work of the children and a sense of admiration at what he sees. Okay, cool. So that's a paragraph on thoughts and feelings. I've managed, obviously, to combine a couple of things in there for you. So that is the sort of writing, the way you would want to write. It's quite a long paragraph, 214 words, but that's the way you would want to write if you're talking about ideas about something, perspectives about something, thoughts about something, feelings about something. Okay, so you look for implicit meanings, explicit meanings, and then try and use mostly implicit meanings, like stuff that you infer from in your answer, and just explain how they feel and why. That's all we've got time for today. I hope that was helpful. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please comment down below. I will catch up with you in the next one.